forward as well. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you, Stuart. And thank you everyone for coming. And I'm just really excited to share my research that I did at University of Southern California. And so there was this, my presentation is on the effective methods to develop L2 oral fluency in a Korean EFL online context. And I was really interested in why. Why do Koreans struggle to grasp L2 oral fluency? And I felt there was a discrepancy between their receptive skills and then their productive skills, receptive as listening and reading, and the productive skills, speaking and writing. And so that was the major question for me in this research. And I did want to bring in kind of the components as well. So it's just three guiding questions that I had for this research that I did. Was what is fluency at first? Okay, well, because we have so many different definitions. And also, what are the major pedagogies that's used to build oral L2 oral fluency in South Korea? And also, what are the components to build L2 oral fluency, and how would it look like at this time of age where a lot of the learning is happening remotely, also in Korea as well? And so, and lastly, I will give recommendations and implications with that. And so I just want to just first cover what is fluency. And I think many people have different ideas and perceptions, but it is the salient feature of one's proficiency in the language. And there are two ways that we could view fluency. And this is from the famous Lenin. And he says that there's broad way and there's a narrow way. And the broad sense of fluency is usually considered as one's mastery or general proficiency, whereas the latter, narrow, sense is more of the ease and automaticity of speech. And here fluency in a broad sense can consist of reading and writing and speaking, and it's normally referred to as a spoken command of a foreign language. And on the other hand, fluency in a narrow sense would be more like an oral examination, right? At the goal of the speaker is to produce the speech at a tempo of a native speaker, unimpeded by the pauses and hesitations and repetitions and false starts and the like. So for the purpose of this presentation, I will think of fluency as the automaticity of speech. I know there's other definitions like utterance fluency and cognitive fluency and all that, but I will not address that in this presentation. So why? This is the number one question I had. I've been here for 10 years and I always see Korean learners struggling with this. Why is it? Because notably, the MOE, the Ministry of Education, did make strides to reform their national curriculum for spoken English. And they recognize the pitfalls of their traditional approach, which is the grammar translation approach, and developing their learners to be proficient speakers of the language. And they later did implement the CLT, Communicative Language Teaching, into their sixth national curriculum in 1995. And now, 2021, I believe that they implemented task-based learning and little more mediated pedagogies to help learners gain oral fluency. So let's look at some major pedagogies that we normally think, and I think many of you guys are familiar of this. So we'll go over each one and see it from the vantage point of fluency. Now, first one is grammar translation method. And this is probably the most common way that many Koreans teach in public schools still today. And it focuses on the literature and grammar of the target language, with passages being translated into and from the mother tongue. And undoubtedly, this structure-based approach may be useful for obtaining grammar, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. However, it falls short on developing learners' communicative abilities, and it focuses mainly on accuracy, while neglecting fluency. And so consequently, researchers say that students who learn through the GTM, grammar translation method, they could talk about the language they have studied, but they cannot talk in that language. And Omar clarifies, he says, quote, students know grammatical rules in the L2, but they lack the ability to communicate in that L2. And a famous researcher again, Richard and Rogers, says, even criticized this method. And he said, quote, a tedious it is a tedious experience of memorizing endless lists of unusual grammar rules and vocabulary, and that it offers no research-based justification for using it in today's classroom. This, if you guys have any thoughts, that'd be good to hear what you think about that. We'll move on to the audiolingual method, and this is based on the behaviors theory. And this arose because of in response to the grammar translation method in the 1950s. And unlike the grammar translation method, this method emphasizes on, quote, acquisition of structures and patterns in common everyday dialogue. And unlike GTA, this drill-based approach was led to believe that students would be able to not just learn about the language, but to actually speak it. But however, due to error fossilization, teachers would deliberately correct speech errors during the early stages of learning. And this in practice will indeed not only stifle the motivation of learners, but it will hinder learners to communicate authentically, and it will disrupt the quote unquote flow and the continuity and the automaticity or smoothness of speech. So this high structured and pattern drills may allow learners to become familiarized with situational conversations, but the drawback of that is that it comes at the expense of using the target in meaningful, creative, and spontaneous ways. And Margros, one researcher, doubts that whether or not these utterance prepares one adequately for free-flowing and spontaneous speech. So from the vantage point of fluency, these drills do very little to develop fluency or even any communicative abilities for that matter. We're going to take a look at CLT now, and this is probably the most common these days that I believe they're using. And I'm sure many of you guys also use CLT in your practice as well. And CLT arose because of the failure to produce fluency and accuracy with the traditional GTA and also the ALM, audiolingual approach. And so the underlying purpose of CLT is to teach the target language for the purpose of communication. And so the learners will be given ample time to use the language, and this is procedural knowledge, rather than merely just to know the grammatical rules and the vocabulary and the structure, which is declarative knowledge here. And so therefore, in a typical CLT, as you guys know, if you look in a CLT classroom, they use role plays. I'm sure you guys use that as well. Dialogues, conversations, interviews and problem solving. And these are usually used for learners to interact for meaning rather than a form-based drill. Now, when we look at it from a fluency standpoint, many would assume that this would naturally develop a L2 general proficiency, which is the broad sense of fluency, and along with the ease and automaticity of speech, which is the narrow sense of fluency. But on the contrary, this meaning-based approach does not generally facilitate repetitive practices is necessary to build automaticity required for cognitive fluency. And so one researcher, Gapton and Salowitz, criticized that CLT provides little in terms of concrete and tangible goals for students. And this is especially true in the area of fluency. Kirk, humorously, he says that they have thrown out the baby with the bathwater. And so he mentions that they took out this repetitive practice, which is needed for automaticity. And so from the vantage point, looking back into fluency, of course, the structure-based approach are deemed adverse to the free-flowing, unhindered nature of communicative activities. And it is suggested that the current national English curriculum should allow some negotiated pedagogies so that it reflects their cultural and contextual particularities rather than just simply following a methodology, which is CLT. And so I think we still need more research how to best implement CLT with fluency-based practice. Now, this is something that I was thinking, then what is the approach today? And I was wondering what that is. And I came across an article by Fauser, and he wrote that the current approach would be more of a test score approach or test prep approach. And we know that as teachers in Korea, I'm sure you guys have many experience, test scores are ubiquitously required in all domains of education and work. High school students need to prepare for the KSAT, and also workers, employees. If you go to the corporate world, they have to pass the OPIC, the oral proficiency assessment. And also, if you reach a certain proficiency score, you even get bumped your salary raise. So this is very important for them. And so, but one thing that it does show that these tests, it reveals the gap between the ability to comprehend and the ability to produce the language. And so when grades and test scores become the focal point of language education, communicative-oriented tasks become less of a priority because teachers must maximize test scores through input of knowledge and also teaching, test-taking techniques and strategies and multiple choice items, all these things. And so the general consensus of the test prep approach is that it seems like from my research and my findings, and Han describes it here, he says that it ranges from anywhere from a grammar translation method to teaching English in English, TEE, KSAT preparation, GRA, which is grammar reading approach, audiolingual method, reading-centered practice, and while using a variety of materials such as audio-visual materials, PowerPoint, YouTube, mandated textbooks, activity books from school or from the EBS, and worksheets. And so Han concludes that these methods can be interpreted as negotiated pedagogies born out of their national curriculum, national exams, and students' belief, teachers' belief about learning and local educational culture. And so the conclusion here with this is that the verdict is similar to all the other pedagogies previously prescribed, meaning form-focused instruction, such as the test score approach, does not favor the development of oral fluency within its learners. And so before I cover the concept, we did cover like the different pedagogies that were used to develop L2 or fluency. But I do want to just kind of explain, and I was thinking about this, what is a Korean EFL online context? And we have to first examine this. And so I divided it up to Korean EFL, and then I divided it to a online context. And so as I describe this, I don't want to, we cannot overgeneralize learners from Korea because all learners in Korea are diverse and they have different linguistic abilities and needs and motivations. And but I think that there are some factors that we should consider in a Korean EFL online context. And so these factors would also pertain to other Asian students in Asia as well. And so that's the first thing is the concept of face. And this is a common phenomenon I'm sure you guys experienced, especially I think in the Korean EFL classroom. It is a combination of, quote, pride, dignity, honor, and self-esteem, as one researcher explains. Students with lower levels of fluency fear of losing face in front of their peers if they make a mistake or if they provide an incorrect word. And on the other hand, students with a higher levels of oral fluency might be afraid to be labeled as show-offs. And so that's where we see the concept of face do play a part in this context of Korean EFL online context. Another factor we need to consider is the hierarchical relationship between teachers and students. And due to deeply embedded ideas of Confucianism, Korean EFL learners believe that they should respect authority, such as their teachers and elders. And since teachers are seen as the transmitter of knowledge, students from these contexts tend to listen attentively and they refrain from talking or asking too much questions, which is seen as a sign of disrespect to the teacher's instruction. And while teaching at Koyang English program at Ilsan, I experienced that students will be very quiet during the class time. But then when we have break time or when the class is over, the students would ask me questions. They will be interactive. And I'll be like, why didn't you speak? Why didn't you interact and speak during the class? And so I think this really breaks the concept or the stereotype that Asian students or Korean students are passive learners. And I think that's by far not exactly what it is. I think Korean students are interactive. They do want to be active learners, but they do have this cultural, I think, barrier or maybe this background which hinders them or maybe more difficult during class time. And so a lot of my students do come to me during break time or after class and ask me a lot of questions. And another last thing is that Korean EFL learners are described as a high context culture, which implies that a lot of unspoken information is implicitly transferred during communication. And so learners will often use nonverbal cues such as gestures and facial expressions to communicate with teachers rather than verbal, like in the counterparts in the West. And so for me, it's just a personal experience. When I asked my students, do you understand what I said? Many Koreans EFL learners would simply nod with their heads rather than saying yes out loud. And so I think we see that this is really a high contest culture that we are in. And so I think for practitioners, for instructors here, I think it's important to develop intercultural communicative competence. And we need to be aware of the distinctions between high context culture, like in Korea and Asia and the Middle East, and maybe in low context culture in the West. And so I think we need to both understand that and keep in mind. Now we're going to address the online context, and I want to first talk about social presence. And social presence is pretty much the degree to which a person perceives their communication partners to be real in mediated communication. In other words, what this pretty much means is that it is the degree of feeling connected with others in the online classroom, either synchronously or asynchronously. And so according to research, social interaction is positively linked with learning outcomes and student satisfaction in terms of online learning. And so the social presence is important and includes anywhere from online communication, interactivity, group cohesion, all of that here. Wow, okay. And also we have teaching presence, which is the instructor's role to design the course, the curriculum, the activities, the timeline, monitoring, managing the conversation, the discourse, establishing direction. So it has been noted from research that teaching presence, the instructor's role in the classroom is central to the learning process. And lastly, the online learning self-efficacy, which just pretty much means one's belief about their ability to learn in an online environment. And students, especially with low technical competencies, will have difficulty learning in an online or Zoom setting because they're unable to use the technological tools that are provided for them. And so for me, when I was teaching adult learners between the age of 40 to 65, I wanted to establish a more interactive component. And I want to teach them how to use small breakout rooms. And I made the mistake of overwhelming them by teaching the whole thing. And so each class, I actually had to be an IT teacher, and I taught them how to click on the small breakout groups. And then the next class, I taught them how to leave the breakout groups by recording my screen and then showing to them explicitly. And so, yeah, I experienced that, and that it may affect student learning. The components for L2 oral fluency, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, which you could read from Rosatier, but these are the 5 components: conscious raising tasks, for example, raising awareness of fluency traits. And you could have a screen share and have a video of a native speaker talking, and you could point out, have students notice what are the different formulaic sequences, what are the different discourse markers, like yeah, well, like these type of things, filler words, and have them highlight these kind of sequences and bring it up into their awareness so that they can use that in their next conversation or have a direct implementation into your practice. And also you could have students have checklists of fluency and what were addressed. I'm not going to spend too much time with this. Yeah, and the rehearsal repetition task is the 4-3-2 task. I might have another research on that next time and how that may complement an online setting. And so I'm going to skip a little bit here because of the sake of time. So we're going to go to the recommendations. And I think really number 1 is establishing a comfortable atmosphere. And this will lower the effective filters of learners. And Stuart mentioned this too in the beginning of this presentation. And this will also increase your social presence, your connectiveness with your learners. And for me, I like to greet each learner by name. I like to touch base with them, have small talk. Even if there's a lot of people in the class, I still think that this is paramount so that students know that we care and that we want to have communication. So this will foster a communication, also creates group cohesion. And also number two, engaging, authentic, and familiar material. And so when we present new information, it's very difficult for L2 learners to attend to both the meaning and the form at the same time. And so it's really important for instructors to have a material that students are interested in and they are familiar with, like social media or Facebook, whatever it is that they like to read about and to know on TikTok or whatever it is. And so it's really important for learners to approximate fluency more quickly within familiar context. Another thing is building self-efficacy by scaffolding instruction. And research has shown that when learners experience similar successful experiences, that builds their belief towards their own learning. And so this is really important for instructors to scaffold and to preview maybe the key vocabulary before going into the fluency exercise, or giving even a brief background knowledge about the topic can really help students to kind of to build their fluency in their activities. And the last two things I want to talk about is pre-task planning. And research has said that if you give that there was increase of fluency, the rate of fluency, when you give planning time from none to 1 minute to 5 minutes to 10 minutes. However, there seems to be no significant difference in linguistic accuracy. And so pre-planning tasks can be either guided or unguided. And through this time, you could have students prepare for their fluency activity that they will do. Okay. And lastly, you can limit correction, but if necessary, use clarification. So we don't want to hamper the flow and continuity of speech. And so research has shown that it might be best to clarify, use clarifications, or if there's a communication breakdown, use echoing or recasting for corrections. And so I believe I am above the limit here. So yes, that is my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. I know there was a lot of information here, but thank you for listening attentively, and I'll be open for any questions or whatnot.
Yeah, thank you, Nehemiah. Everyone, please unmute yourselves and give your best clap.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, any questions? Or I was thinking about maybe what you guys use for your to build oral fluency, or any questions? Yes, the research. Yes, I think I had like 90 sources for this paper. 90, I think I had 100 sources to write this. My favorite research gate. I think JSTOR. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
I don't have access because I don't have my grad studies anymore. My university doesn't have it. I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous. That looks amazing. You pulled it together just incredibly in an integrated way. I really enjoyed listening.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
I feel like it's really bang on to the reality of context for Korean students.
Yes. Kristen asked, are there materials you thought would be familiar but weren't? Oh, so like when Kristen, do you mean like whenever I have a fluency exercise and I'm choosing topics for them to talk about? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or was there something, maybe like a format of something that you presented that you thought, oh, they're, digitally aware, so they'll know how to use this app, or they've heard of this, format of something on social media, and then there was maybe some confusion because actually they weren't, aware of it, or yeah, also maybe the material content itself, like an issue or an event that you thought would be, I don't know, well known, but then actually you had to go back and introduce that thing.
I'm trying to think. Was any like materials?
I'm just curious because I teach the young learners.
Oh, okay.
So
yes.
That's I'm actually surprised by what they do know or what they're not aware of sometimes, and what things they can use, like technology wise, and things that get them stumped. So it's a bit different,
Right, that is true. I think stories are really great. Like having especially young learners, they story really draws them in, and I think having them first listen with receptive skills, listening or maybe reading, stories, short stories, or there's also YouTube videos with short stories in English, and then have them do a digital storytelling. And I think there was a presenter like 2019 where he had students like record themselves telling the story and using that as an oral activity. And for me, I would use that as a fluency exercise. I would have them and give them pre-task with vocabulary and have that they could use, have them understand what the words are, and have them use them, try to use them in the digital
Yeah.
storytelling. Yeah.
But I'm curious about older learners too.
Older
So
learners,
my
yeah.
question was
Yes.
more directed towards older
Oh,
learners
okay.
because I teach
Older
young learners, but I'm curious about what goes on with
Mhm.
adult learners or like high school, middle school.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think really that's the thing that for instructors, that's the thing that we need to find engaging, authentic material that students can enjoy talking about. And so I find that it really depends on the students. And I think for especially the adults, I think they do are aware of the news. And so they hear the news, they listen to the news in Korean, and then if I pull up a news in English, they do have something that they want to talk about, so they're already aware of that. So I found that news is also really good for especially older learners. I don't know if all of them would be interested in news, but in my case, in my situation, news was something that I used as well. Like for example, what was the news that I used? I'm trying to remember here.
And
Yes.
I found that with like mature learners, they respond well to articles, and
Yes.
a lot of them are, everyday news readers as well. So
Mhm.
they actually
Yes.
can enjoy like activities based on like social commentary, and
Yes.
especially things that go global.
Oh yes, right. Trends. I think for we as teachers, we need to know the trends too. What are the kids talking about? What are on their phones? And just for me to talk about, hey, what are you listening to these days? Or what games are you playing these days? These questions can help to find authentic material for students to talk about and to build oral fluency. So yeah, I'll think about it, and Chris, I'll let you know if there's. I just can't think of it at the top of my head right now. Yes. Yes. All right.
Okay, everybody.
Well, that
Thank you
was
very much.
fantastic. 2 wonderful research presentations in a
Before
row.
you go,
I got so much from that.
awfully sorry. I still need to mention the Easter egg for
Yes.
this presentation. Easter egg
Yes.
number 5, ladies and gentlemen, Black Panther. Black Panther.
That's a good one.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah, you got 2 Easter eggs from this, so I'm sure
Yes.
you feel happy about it.
Hope you guys win that book. I've got